When love meets America. There is a moment many people never talk about. It happens quietly, usually at night, when the house is silent and your phone screen goes dark. You suddenly wonder whether learning English, loving someone from another culture, and starting a life in America was courage, or a very well-disguised mistake. This video is for that moment. Not the shiny Instagram version of love abroad, but the real one. Slow, confusing, emotional, and unexpectedly transformative. 2 weeks ago, I was standing in a small American kitchen, wearing socks because the floor was cold, listening to the wind outside push against the windows. In my home country, wind like that meant rain, warmth, and the smell of earth. Here, it meant dry air, winter skin, and silence. My partner, an American, was talking to me about something simple. Groceries. Weekend plans. Very normal words. Very normal English. And yet my brain froze. You know that feeling. When you know the words, but they don't arrive fast enough. When your mouth wants to answer, but your confidence is still buffering. In that moment, love met America. And language stood between us like a polite but stubborn wall. Many people think learning English is about vocabulary or grammar. But the real battle happens somewhere else. It happens when English becomes emotional. When it carries disappointment, affection, misunderstanding, or love. Your brain processes emotions and language in different systems. Neuroscience shows that when emotions rise, stress, fear of being judged, fear of losing someone, your working memory shrinks. In simple terms, the more you care, the harder it becomes to speak clearly. That's why you can order coffee in English just fine, but struggle to explain your feelings to someone you love. And that's where many learners quietly give up. They say, "I'm bad at languages." But what they really mean is, "I'm tired of feeling small." Living in the United States amplifies this feeling. The culture moves fast. Conversations overlap. People finish your sentences, not to be rude, but because that's the rhythm here. The climate even plays a role. Cold weather pushes people indoors. Less small talk. More distance. If you come from a culture where warmth means closeness, physical and emotional, America can feel emotionally cold before it ever feels logical. I remember walking outside one morning, breath visible in the air, thinking, how can a place be so open, yet feel so closed at the same time? Loving an American adds another layer. Love doesn't slow down for language learners. It assumes understanding. It expects response. And when you pause too long, the silence fills itself with meaning, often the wrong meaning. That pause can sound like indifference, or distance, or rejection, even when it's none of those things. Here's something most English courses never tell you. Fluency is not speed. Fluency is timing plus safety. You speak better when you feel safe. During those first 2 weeks, I noticed something surprising. When I stopped trying to sound correct and started speaking slowly, intentionally, imperfectly, something changed. My partner leaned in. Conversations softened. The pressure dropped. Simple English became emotional English. I feel tired today. I don't understand, but I want to. Can you say it slowly? These are not weak sentences. They are powerful ones. Psychologically, this works because you are reducing cognitive load. You are telling your nervous system, we are not in danger. When your body relaxes, your brain retrieves language more easily. This is why practicing English through stories, especially emotional, real-life stories, works better than drills. Stories activate memory, emotion, and meaning at the same time. And this story, this one, is not about perfect love. It's about imperfect people choosing patience. America teaches independence, strong boundaries, clear personal space. Love, in many other cultures, teaches merging, shared silence, reading between lines. When these systems collide, misunderstandings are inevitable. But they are not failures. They are data. Information you can learn from. In those 2 weeks, I learned more English from quiet moments than from textbooks. From watching how Americans express care indirectly. From noticing how I need space does not mean I don't love you. From realizing that love across cultures is not louder, it is slower. If you are listening to this and feeling behind, exhausted, or tempted to quit, let me say this clearly: your struggle is not a sign of incapacity. It is a sign that you are learning in a high-stakes environment. Love raises the stakes. Immigration raises the stakes. Identity raises the stakes. Of course it feels hard. But here is the quiet truth. When love meets America, it does not need perfect English. It needs honest English. Slow English. Human English. And that kind of English is something you already have access to, right now in your own story. This journey is not about becoming someone else. It's about learning to be understood without disappearing. And that is where everything begins. The climate shock. Nobody warned me that the weather would teach me English faster than any classroom ever could. 2 weeks ago, I stepped outside early in the morning, wrapped in a jacket that was clearly losing the battle. The sky was pale, almost unfinished, and the air felt sharp, not dramatic, not poetic, just dry and cold enough to make your lungs hesitate for half a second. In my home country, mornings usually arrive gently. Warmth first, conversation later. In many parts of the United States, especially where I was staying, the climate does not ask how you feel. It tells you how the day will go. And strangely, that changes the way you speak. Cold weather does something subtle to people. Scientists talk about it in terms of physiology, vasoconstriction, reduced dopamine, lower social energy, but you feel it before you can name it. People talk less. They conserve words the way the body conserves heat. Conversations become efficient. Shorter sentences. Fewer emotional decorations. English in the cold sounds different. At first, I thought my listening skills were getting worse. People spoke faster. Or maybe sharper. The words felt clipped, practical, goal-oriented. It's cold. I'll be late. Let's reschedule. No long explanations. No emotional warm-up. Just meaning delivered quickly, like throwing a coat at someone instead of helping them put it on. If you are learning English, this can feel brutal. Your brain is already working hard to decode sounds. Add cold, unfamiliar light, and a culture that values efficiency, and suddenly your confidence starts slipping. You begin to second-guess words you already know. You wonder if people are annoyed with you. You replay conversations in your head, adjusting imaginary subtitles. This is not weakness. This is context. Climate shapes culture, and culture shapes language. In warmer regions, people linger. In colder climates, people plan. This affects how English is used emotionally. Americans are often described as direct, but directness is not rudeness. It is adaptation. When the environment is demanding, communication becomes functional. The language trims itself down. For someone in love, especially across cultures, this can feel personal when it is not. I remember one evening when my partner came home, cheeks red from the cold, shoulders tense. I asked a simple question in English, slowly, carefully. The answer was short, neutral, efficient. My first emotional reaction was familiar. Did I say something wrong? But then I paused. This pause mattered. Psychology calls this attribution. When something feels off, the brain looks for a cause. Under stress, we blame ourselves. Under cultural stress, we blame language. Under emotional stress, we blame love. Climate quietly adds pressure to all three. Once I stopped personalizing the weather, I started understanding the language better. Cold climates reduce facial expressiveness. This is documented. Muscles tighten. Microexpressions decrease. If you rely on facial cues to understand meaning, as many language learners do, you suddenly lose part of your translation system. So you feel lost, even when the words are simple. That's why climate shock often feels like language shock. Here's the interesting part. When I slowed my English down even more, something unexpected happened. Conversations warmed up. Not because the temperature changed, but because rhythm did. Slower speech invites patience. It creates space. It signals care. "I'm cold today," I said once, choosing honesty over fluency. That sentence did more than explain temperature. It opened a door. In American culture, naming your state, physical or emotional, is often the first step to connection. You don't wait for people to guess. You inform them. This is practical, efficient, and deeply respectful of boundaries. Once I understood that, English felt less like a test and more like a tool. Climate also affects daily routines, which affects exposure to language. Fewer spontaneous conversations. More planned interactions. Less street talk, more indoor talk. This means learners must be intentional. You don't absorb English by accident as easily. You choose moments. You create them. That realization changed how I practiced. Instead of chasing perfect sentences, I focused on repeated, climate-related language. Weather, clothing, energy levels. Small talk that fits the season. It's colder than yesterday. I need more layers. Winter makes me quiet. These sentences are simple, but they are alive. They match reality. Cognitive science shows that language sticks better when it is emotionally and physically grounded. When your body feels the cold and your mouth names it, memory strengthens. Vocabulary becomes embodied. English stops floating. It lands. Loving an American through this climate taught me something else. Silence is not absence. In colder environments, silence is often rest. Processing. Recovery. If you misread it as rejection, you suffer unnecessarily. When I stopped filling every pause with anxiety, my listening improved. My speaking followed. This is not about becoming tougher. It is about becoming clearer. If you are learning English in the United States and feeling disconnected, ask yourself this: are you fighting the climate or listening to it? Are you trying to sound warm in a cold system, Or are you learning how warmth is expressed differently? Adaptation is not betrayal of who you are. It is translation. The climate shocked me, yes. But it also simplified things. It stripped language down to function, then slowly allowed emotion back in, once trust was built. Just like love. Just like learning. In the cold, English taught me patience. And patience quietly taught me English. Language fatigue is real. There is a special kind of tiredness that sleep does not fix. You can drink coffee. You can take a walk. You can promise yourself to try harder tomorrow. And still, the exhaustion stays. Not in your muscles, but somewhere behind your eyes. That is language fatigue. And if you are learning English while living and loving in the United States, you know exactly what I mean, even if you've never had a word for it. 2 weeks ago, after a full day of listening, translating, smiling at the right moments, and guessing meanings from tone, I sat on the couch and felt completely empty. Nothing dramatic had happened. No arguments. No mistakes anyone pointed out. Just ordinary life in English. And that, somehow, was enough to drain everything. Your brain is not lazy. It is overworked. Neuroscience explains this clearly. When you operate in a second language, your brain runs multiple processes at once. Sound recognition, grammar prediction, emotional interpretation, cultural filtering, and self-monitoring. Even silence requires effort because you are preparing for the next possible interaction. This constant low-level vigilance consumes cognitive energy. Over time, it builds up as fatigue. And here's the cruel part. The better you get, the more tired you feel. Because expectations rise. At the beginning, people forgive pauses. They simplify their speech. They help. But once you seem good enough, the support quietly disappears. Conversations speed up. Giochi come faster. Subtext thickens. And suddenly, you are drowning in English that everyone assumes you can swim through. This is where many learners start blaming themselves. I should be better by now. Why am I still translating in my head? Why does love feel harder in English? But the problem is not motivation. It is recovery. Language fatigue is not about lack of effort. It is about lack of rest between efforts. In American culture, productivity is admired. Pushing through is celebrated. Rest is often scheduled, optimized, or postponed. When this mindset mixes with language learning, you end up treating your brain like a machine instead of a nervous system. You expect constant performance. You forget that comprehension itself costs energy. I noticed this most clearly in emotional conversations. My partner would ask something simple. How was your day? A harmless question. A loving one. And my brain would hesitate. Not because I didn't know the words, but because answering honestly required emotional vocabulary, memory, sequencing, and vulnerability, all in a non-native language. The cost felt high. Sometimes, the easiest option was a short answer. Sometimes, silence. That silence can be misread. In relationships, silence often triggers anxiety. People fill it with stories. Usually negative ones. They don't care. They're pulling away. Something is wrong. When language fatigue is involved, silence is not emotional distance. It is neurological overload. Understanding this changed how I treated myself, and how we communicated. Instead of pushing through every conversation, I started naming the fatigue. In simple English. No explanations. No apologies. My English is tired today. I need a slow conversation. Can we talk later? These sentences did something powerful. They made the invisible visible. Psychologically, naming a state reduces its intensity. This is called affect labeling. When you label fatigue, your brain shifts from survival mode to regulation mode. Stress hormones drop. Clarity returns faster. And importantly, the other person stops guessing. This is especially important in cross-cultural love. Americans value clarity over guessing, directness over emotional decoding. Saying you are tired, mentally, linguistically, is not weakness. It is cooperation. Language fatigue also affects how you practice listening and speaking. When tired, your brain narrows its attention. You hear less nuance. You miss connectors. You focus on keywords and ignore tone. This can make English feel colder, harsher, more mechanical than it really is. That's why forcing practice during fatigue often backfires. Cognitive science shows that learning under high fatigue leads to shallow encoding. You hear words, but they don't stick. You repeat phrases, but they don't integrate. Rest is not a break from learning. It is part of the learning cycle. During those 2 weeks, the biggest improvement in my English did not come from studying more. It came from studying less, but more deliberately. Short listening sessions. Familiar voices. Predictable topics. English that felt safe. I also learned to separate identity from performance. Some days, my English was strong. Some days, it collapsed. That fluctuation had nothing to do with intelligence. It had everything to do with sleep, stress, emotional safety, and environment. Once I stopped attaching my self-worth to fluency, fatigue lost some of its power. Love helped here, too. When you feel accepted even when your language fails, your brain relaxes. When your brain relaxes, language returns. This feedback loop is real. Studies on second language acquisition consistently show that emotional safety accelerates fluency. Fear slows it down. If you are watching this and feeling exhausted, I want you to hear this clearly. Fatigue does not mean you are regressing. It often means you are integrating. Your brain is reorganizing, making space, building deeper structures. You don't quit a workout because your muscles are sore. You don't quit love because it challenges you. And you don't quit English because your brain needs rest. Language fatigue is not a wall. It is a signal. Listen to it, respect it, and respond with patience. Because when you stop fighting your tired English, it slowly becomes stronger, without asking for permission. Dating across cultures. Dating across cultures is not romantic in the way movies promise. It is romantic in the way renovation is romantic. Dusty, confusing, loud at the wrong times, and strangely satisfying when something finally fits. 2 weeks ago, I learned this lesson over something very small. A message. A short one. No emojis. No extra words. Just a sentence that, in my culture, would sound distant. Maybe even cold. In American dating culture, it was normal. Efficient. Neutral. My emotional brain reacted first. My logical brain arrived late. This is how misunderstandings begin. Not with big arguments, but with tiny translations your heart rushes to finish before your mind has a chance. When you date someone from another culture, you are not just learning a new language. You are learning a new default setting for human behavior. And defaults are dangerous because we don't know we have them. In many cultures, love is indirect. Care is shown through anticipation. You notice. You adjust. You read between lines. In American culture, especially in modern dating, care is often shown through clarity. You say what you need. You ask for space. You negotiate time. It is not less loving. It is differently structured. But when you are learning English, clarity feels risky. Because clarity requires words you are not confident with. So you hesitate. You soften. You imply. And suddenly, your partner does not understand you. Not because they don't care, but because implication is not part of their emotional grammar. This gap can feel painful. I remember sitting across from my partner, trying to explain a feeling that made perfect sense in my first language. In English, it came out fragmented, slower, less poetic. My fear was obvious. What if this sounds childish? What if it sounds wrong? But something unexpected happened. They listened. Carefully. Patiently. Without finishing my sentences. And that taught me something important. In American dating culture, effort matters more than elegance. Psychology supports this. Research on relationship communication shows that perceived effort increases trust more than verbal perfection. When someone sees you trying, pausing, searching, correcting, they interpret it as investment, not incompetence. This changed how I approached English in dating. Instead of rehearsing sentences in my head, I focused on rhythm. Short statements. One idea at a time. I feel confused. I need more time to answer. This is important to me. These sentences are not dramatic, but they are clear. And clarity, in American culture, is intimacy. Another major difference is how conflict is handled. In many cultures, conflict is softened, delayed, wrapped in context. In the US, especially in close relationships, conflict is often addressed directly and early. This can feel aggressive if you are not used to it, but it is often an attempt to prevent emotional buildup. When your English is limited, this directness can feel overwhelming. Words arrive fast. Emotions are named quickly. You may feel pressured to respond at the same speed. That pressure increases anxiety. Anxiety blocks language access. The cycle tightens. The solution is not to match speed. It is to manage pace. I started saying one sentence that changed everything. Give me a moment. I want to say this right. This sentence does three things. It slows the interaction. It signals care. And it protects your nervous system. Once your body feels safer, your English improves naturally. Dating across cultures also reveals differences in how love is measured. In American culture, love is often shown through consistency and respect for boundaries. Remembering plans. Being on time. Communicating availability. For someone from a more emotionally expressive culture, this can feel transactional at first. But it is not about distance. It is about reliability. Understanding this helped me interpret actions instead of tone. When my partner respected my schedule, it was love. When they asked before assuming, it was love. When they waited for my English to catch up, it was love. Language learning research shows that emotional interpretation improves when learners stop relying solely on words and start observing behavior patterns. This reduces miscommunication and emotional burnout. There is also humor in all of this. Dating across cultures creates moments so awkward they become educational. Misused words. Accidental double meanings. Serious conversations interrupted by laughter because a sentence landed wrong. These moments are not failures. They are shared memories in the making. And laughter, neurologically, reduces cortisol. It opens learning pathways. It makes language stick. The biggest shift came when I stopped treating English as a test I could fail. Dating is not an exam. Love is not graded. You are not being evaluated on accent or syntax. You are being understood or not, and understanding can be negotiated. If you are dating an American while learning English, remember this: you are not behind. You are bilingual in progress. Your silence may be processing. Your pauses may be care. Your mistakes may be bridges. Dating across cultures is not about becoming fluent faster. It is about becoming honest slower. And sometimes that honesty, spoken imperfectly, is the most fluent thing you can offer. Love through simple English. There is a quiet myth that hurts many English learners more than grammar ever could. The myth says, if you can't express love beautifully in English, maybe you don't feel it deeply enough. That myth is wrong. 2 weeks ago, I learned this lesson in the least dramatic way possible. No big confession. No poetic speech. Just a moment at the end of a long day, when energy was low and English felt heavy. My partner looked at me and waited. Not impatiently. Just open. And all I could say was, I'm here. Even if I'm quiet. That sentence was simple. Almost too simple. But it landed. Simple English carries weight when it is honest. Many learners believe love must be communicated with advanced vocabulary, romantic phrases, perfect timing, emotional precision. But neuroscience tells a different story. Emotional connection does not depend on linguistic complexity. It depends on congruence, when words, tone, and intention align. Simple language often aligns better because there is less room to hide. When you speak simply, your nervous system relaxes. When your nervous system relaxes, your voice becomes more natural. And when your voice is natural, people trust it. This is especially important in American culture. Americans are exposed to a lot of language, advertising language, motivational language, polished language. Because of this, they often listen for sincerity more than style. Overly complex emotional language can sometimes feel rehearsed. Simple statements feel real. I care about you. I don't want to lose this. I'm trying, even when it's hard. These sentences are not impressive. They are effective. I noticed that when I tried to sound romantic in English, I became tense. My pronunciation tightened. My pace rushed. I monitored myself too closely. The results sounded less emotional, not more. But when I allowed my English to stay basic, something softened. Psychology explains this through cognitive load. When you reduce linguistic demands, your brain frees resources for emotional expression. Intonation, pauses, eye contact. Love is communicated through these channels as much as through words. Simple English also reduces misunderstanding. In cross-cultural relationships, misunderstandings often come from assumed meanings. Complex sentences invite interpretation. Simple sentences invite clarity. When you say less, people ask more questions. Questions create dialogue. Dialogue builds connection. I remember explaining a feeling using very basic language. I feel far from home today. In my first language, this feeling has layers: nostalgia, loss, longing, identity. In English, it came out flat. But instead of misunderstanding me, my partner asked gently, "What do you miss the most?" That question opened the door for a deeper conversation than any prepared speech could have. This is how simple English becomes emotional English. There is also courage in simplicity. When you speak simply, you cannot hide behind vocabulary. You show exactly where you are. That vulnerability is uncomfortable, but it builds trust. Relationship research consistently shows that vulnerability, expressed clearly and without over-explanation, increases intimacy. Simple English also helps you listen better. When you stop preparing complex sentences in your head, you become more present. You notice tone, timing, body language. You respond instead of performing. This shift transforms conversations from stressful exchanges into shared moments. During those 2 weeks, I practiced one rule, one feeling, one sentence. Not a paragraph. Not a justification. Just one emotional truth at a time. I feel nervous. I feel safe with you. I feel confused, not angry. This practice changed everything. Conflicts became shorter. Misunderstandings resolved faster. And my English improved, not because I studied more, but because I used it with purpose. There is scientific backing for this. Language acquisition improves when learners use language for meaningful interaction rather than abstract practice. Emotional relevance increases retention. When a sentence matters to your life, your brain keeps it. Simple English sentences repeat naturally. They appear again and again in daily life. Repetition strengthens neural pathways. Over time, fluency grows, not explosively but steadily. Loving an American taught me that love is not a performance. It is a process of being understood over time. Simple English supports that process because it invites patience from both sides. If you are afraid that your English is too basic for love, let me say this clearly: love does not require advanced grammar. It requires availability, presence, willingness to try again when words fall short. Some of the most meaningful moments in those 2 weeks happened in silence, supported by a few simple sentences that carried more truth than any polished phrase ever could. Simple English does not limit your love. It reveals it. And once love feels safe in simple words, complex language grows naturally, without pressure, without fear, and without pretending to be someone you are not. American family dynamics. Meeting an American family is not loud. That was the first surprise. No sudden questions. No emotional interrogation. No dramatic curiosity disguised as politeness. Instead, there is space. Smiles that wait. Conversations that circle you gently, not to test you, but to observe who you are when you are comfortable. 2 weeks ago, I walked into a living room that felt unusually calm. The furniture was spaced out, like everyone had agreed not to crowd each other, physically or emotionally. People greeted me warmly, then returned to what they were doing. No pressure to perform. No demand to explain myself. And somehow, that felt more intimidating than attention. In many cultures, family closeness is immediate and intense. You are asked everything. Your story is collected quickly. In American family dynamics, closeness is often earned gradually. Respect comes first. Emotional access follows. This affects language in subtle ways. When you are learning English, silence can feel like failure. You assume you are expected to fill it, to talk, to contribute. But in many American families, silence is not a gap. It is comfort. People don't rush to fill space. They allow it. Understanding this changed how I spoke, and how I listened. At first, I thought my English wasn't enough for family conversations. People spoke casually. Topics shifted quickly. Stories referenced shared memories I didn't have. I smiled a lot. I nodded. My brain worked overtime trying to keep up. This is where language learning becomes emotional again. You are not just translating words. You are translating belonging. Family systems psychology explains that families operate on unspoken rules. Who speaks when? How disagreement is shown. How affection is expressed. When you enter a new family, especially across cultures, you feel these rules before you understand them. And if your language is limited, the confusion intensifies. One key difference stood out to me: independence. In American families, independence is not distance. It is respect. Adult children often live separately, make decisions privately, and communicate intentionally. This can feel cold if you come from a culture where family involvement equals love. But here, love often looks like non-interference. This matters for language learners because it changes what needs to be said. In more collective cultures, much is assumed. In American families, little is assumed. Needs are spoken. Preferences are stated. Boundaries are verbalized. If you don't say something, people often assume you are fine. This can be dangerous when your English is limited. You may stay quiet out of politeness, while others interpret silence as agreement or comfort. Over time, misunderstandings grow, not because anyone is unkind, but because communication styles differ. I learned to use very simple English to protect clarity. I'm not sure. I need time to think. I'm quiet, but I'm okay. These sentences prevented misinterpretation. They made my internal state visible without requiring long explanations. American families tend to appreciate this kind of transparency. It reduces guesswork. It respects everyone's autonomy. Another surprise was emotional expression. Affection in American families is often understated. Fewer dramatic declarations. More practical care. Asking if you ate. Offering a ride. Remembering small preferences. This kind of love speaks softly. If you are waiting for emotional reassurance through words, you might miss it. Language learners often focus on what is said. But in American family culture, what is done carries equal meaning. Observing actions becomes part of comprehension. This reduces pressure on your English and increases your understanding. There is also an important psychological safety element here. American families often avoid emotional confrontation in group settings. Sensitive topics are discussed privately. This can feel like avoidance, but it is often a boundary practice. Understanding this helped me stop interpreting politeness as distance. When my English wasn't strong enough to participate deeply, I focused on listening patterns. Tone. Timing. Who speaks when. This observational learning is powerful. Sociolinguistic research shows that learners who observe interaction patterns acquire pragmatic competence faster than those who focus only on vocabulary. Over time, I noticed something comforting. No one expected perfection. Effort mattered. Presence mattered. Respect mattered. My accent did not. When I spoke slowly, people slowed down with me. When I asked for repetition, no one was offended. In fact, many appreciated the honesty. American family culture often values direct communication of needs, even linguistic ones. What surprised me most was how space created closeness. By not being pushed to perform emotionally, I relaxed. When I relaxed, my English improved. When my English improved, connection followed naturally. This feedback loop felt gentle, not forced. If you are learning English while entering an American family system, remember this: you do not need to impress. You need to be consistent, clear, respectful of boundaries, yours and theirs. Belonging here is not loud. It grows quietly, through repeated small interactions that feel safe. And sometimes, the most meaningful thing you can say in simple English is not a story, but a boundary. That boundary, respected, becomes trust. And trust slowly becomes family. Policies change daily life. Nobody tells you that love in America comes with paperwork. Not romantic paperwork. Not handwritten letters or old photos. I mean forms, rules, appointments, deadlines, policies that quietly shape your days without ever asking how you feel about them. 2 weeks ago, I learned this in the most ordinary way possible, by waiting. Waiting for an answer. Waiting for a system to update. Waiting for clarity that did not arrive in human language, but in automated emails and official wording that felt colder than the weather outside. If you are learning English, policies are exhausting. Not because they are complicated, though many are, but because they are emotionally neutral. Policies do not care if you are tired, in love, confused, or scared. They speak one language: precision. And precision is unforgiving when your English is still growing. This is where daily life changes. In many countries, systems bend. People explain. Context matters. In the United States, systems are designed to be consistent, not flexible. Fairness is defined as sameness. The rule applies to everyone, regardless of personal story. This can feel safe or brutal, depending on where you stand. When you are building a relationship, especially across cultures, these policies enter your home quietly. They affect schedules, plans, stress levels, even how you speak to each other. I noticed that during policy-related moments, discussions about healthcare, insurance, work authorization, school systems, my English changed. It became tighter, less emotional, more careful. I chose words slowly, afraid of misunderstanding something that could not be undone with an apology. This fear is rational. Research in psychology shows that high-stakes language use activates threat responses in the brain. When consequences feel permanent, your nervous system shifts into protection mode. Language access narrows. Fluency drops. You may sound less like yourself, even to people who know you well. This is not because you suddenly forgot English. It is because your brain is prioritizing safety. Policies also influence relationship dynamics. In American culture, personal responsibility is emphasized. You are expected to manage your own documents, appointments, and compliance. When you are learning English, this independence can feel isolating. Asking for help may feel like burdening someone you love. Staying silent feels safer, but silence increases stress. I struggled with this tension. I wanted to be capable, to prove that I could handle life here. At the same time, policies moved faster than my confidence. Forms used language that felt distant from daily speech. Even simple words carried legal weight. Eligibility. Coverage. Verification. This is where love quietly becomes practical. My partner did not fix the system. They sat next to me while I navigated it. Sometimes we said very little. Sometimes English slowed down to its most basic form. I don't understand this part. Can we read it together? I'm nervous about making a mistake. These sentences were not about language. They were about trust. American systems may not adapt to your feelings, but relationships can. When someone is willing to slow down with you inside a fast system, that is love expressed in action. There is also an important cultural lesson here. Americans often separate emotion from policy. This is not because they lack empathy. It is because systems are designed to operate without it. Understanding this helped me stop personalizing the coldness of procedures. The system is not rejecting you. It is simply indifferent. Once I accepted that, my emotional energy returned. I stopped wasting effort trying to feel understood by policies. Instead, I focused on understanding them. One step at a time. One sentence at a time. Simple English again became my ally. Language learning research shows that comprehension improves when learners shift from emotional interpretation to functional interpretation in technical contexts. In other words, don't ask how the language feels. Ask what it does. This mindset reduced anxiety. Policies also affect long-term thinking, marriage, family, children. In the US, many of these decisions intersect with legal frameworks. Taxes, healthcare, education. These topics enter conversations early. They are not romantic, but they are real. Talking about them in English can feel intimidating. I learned to separate emotional conversations from policy conversations. Not in time, but in tone. Policy talk stayed factual. Emotional talk stayed human. Mixing the two only created confusion. For example, "This rule worries me" is emotional. "This rule says we need this document" is factual. Keeping these sentences distinct prevented arguments that were actually about stress, not disagreement. If you are living in America and learning English, policies will test you. Not your intelligence, but your patience. They will challenge your confidence. They may even shake your sense of belonging. But here is the quiet truth I learned: surviving systems together strengthens relationships. When love remains steady while policies remain cold, something solid forms. You begin to trust not the environment, but each other. Policies change daily life. They influence schedules, moods, and mental load. But they do not define the meaning of your effort. You are not behind because systems feel heavy. You are learning how to live inside them, slowly, carefully, and honestly. And that kind of learning, though invisible, is powerful. The breaking point. Breaking points rarely announce themselves. They don't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. They show up quietly, disguised as tiredness, sarcasm, or a sentence you almost say, but swallow instead. Mine came one evening when nothing was technically wrong. Dinner was normal. The house was calm. The conversation moved smoothly, too smoothly. I understood most of the words. I answered without pausing too long. From the outside, it looked like progress. From the inside, something was cracking. My chest felt tight. My thoughts blurred. English sounded distant, like it was coming from another room. This is what emotional overload looks like in a second language. Psychologists describe this moment as cognitive emotional saturation. Your brain has been adapting non-stop: language, culture, climate, love, systems, and suddenly it hits capacity. When that happens, even familiar things feel heavy. Even kindness can feel demanding. I remember thinking, if one more thing needs explaining, I won't have the words. That thought scared me more than any argument ever could. Breaking points in cross-cultural relationships often get misinterpreted. One person sees withdrawal. The other feels misunderstood. Both feel alone in the same room. When language is involved, the gap widens faster because repair takes words. And words are the very thing that feel unavailable. I didn't want to blame English. I didn't want to blame love. So my mind chose the easiest target: myself. I'm not strong enough. I should be better by now. Maybe this is too much. These thoughts feel personal, but they are predictable. Under prolonged stress, the brain looks for a single cause to simplify complexity. Self-blame is familiar. It gives the illusion of control. Neuroscience tells us something important here. When emotional stress peaks, language processing drops. This is not a character flaw. It is biology. The brain redirects resources to threat management. Fluency is deprioritized. Silence becomes protective. Understanding this did not immediately fix the feeling, but it changed the story I told myself. Instead of seeing the breaking point as failure, I began to see it as information. Something needed adjusting. The moment shifted when I finally said one sentence. Slowly. Without decoration. I feel full. Not angry. Just full. That was it. No explanation. No backstory. No perfect phrasing. And something softened. Breaking points are not solved by eloquence. They are relieved by accuracy. Naming the right state, even with simple words, reduces confusion. It gives the other person a map. American culture, in particular, responds well to state-based communication. Saying what you feel is often more helpful than explaining why you feel it, especially when language energy is low. Once the pressure to perform disappeared, English returned in pieces. Not all at once, but enough. We sat quietly. No fixing. No conclusions. Just shared space. This is an important lesson for language learners. Silence does not always need translation. Sometimes, it needs permission. Language fatigue, cultural differences, policy stress, emotional adaptation, they accumulate. If you don't release them intentionally, they release themselves unpredictably. That is what breaking points are, unplanned releases. Science supports this. Emotional regulation improves when stress is acknowledged early and often, rather than suppressed. Small, frequent check-ins prevent large collapses. This applies to relationships and to language learning. After that evening, I changed one habit. I stopped waiting until I was overwhelmed to speak up. Instead, I practiced early signals. Simple ones. My brain is slow today. I need quiet English right now. I'm close to tired. These sentences acted like pressure valves. They kept emotions from boiling over. And they protected the relationship from misunderstandings that were never about love in the first place. Breaking points also teach you what matters. In that moment of overload, what I wanted was not better English. It was safety. To be allowed to pause without consequence. To be understood without performance. And that realization reshaped how I practiced English afterward. I stopped measuring progress by fluency alone. I started measuring it by recovery. How fast could I come back after confusion? How gently could I treat myself when words disappeared? Language learning is not linear. Love is not linear. Adaptation is not linear. Expecting smooth progress in a life built across cultures is unrealistic and unfair. If you are watching this and feeling close to a breaking point, hear this clearly. Reaching your limit does not mean you chose wrong. It means you have been trying hard for a long time. Breaking points are not the end of the story. They are the moment the story asks for a different pace. Slow down. Simplify. Name what you can. Rest where words fail. Because when you survive a breaking point with honesty instead of shame, something quietly shifts. You don't become weaker. You become more precise. And precision, especially in simple English, is what carries you forward when everything else feels too heavy to hold. Science behind understanding. Understanding does not fail because you are bad at English. It fails because your brain is busy protecting you. That realization came to me slowly, not from a book, but from watching patterns in myself over those 2 weeks. On good days, English flowed. On hard days, the same sentences felt impossible. Nothing about my intelligence changed. Nothing about my motivation disappeared. Only one thing shifted: my nervous system. This is where science quietly steps in and explains what emotion often confuses. Your brain has 2 priorities when you live in another language: survival and connection. When both are activated at the same time, as they are in love, immigration, and cultural adaptation, one will always win. Survival comes first. That means when you feel stressed, judged, rushed, or uncertain, your brain redirects energy away from language precision and toward threat monitoring. This is not metaphorical. Neuroimaging studies show reduced activity in language processing areas under emotional stress. The words don't disappear. Access to them does. That's why you suddenly forget English you used yesterday. It's not gone. It's locked behind a nervous system that thinks you need protection more than fluency. Once I understood this, my relationship with English changed. I stopped asking, "Why can't I speak?" and started asking, "What does my brain think I need right now?" Often, the answer was simple: safety. Safety does not mean comfort. It means predictability. Slow pace. Low stakes. Familiar patterns. When these elements are present, your brain relaxes its grip on resources and language flows back in. This explains something many learners experience but rarely understand. You speak better with people who feel emotionally safe, even if their English is not simpler. Your partner's patience mattered more than their vocabulary. Another important concept is cognitive load. Your brain can only process so much information at once. When you are learning English through life, real conversations, emotions, responsibilities, you are constantly multitasking. Listening, translating, interpreting tone, managing emotion, planning a response. Add cultural interpretation, and the load increases further. When cognitive load exceeds capacity, comprehension drops. This is why slowing down works. Not because slow English is easier in theory, but because it reduces simultaneous demands. One idea at a time. One emotion at a time. One sentence at a time. Your brain catches up when you stop outrunning it. There is also the issue of prediction. Your brain predicts language based on patterns. In your first language, prediction is automatic. In English, especially across cultures, prediction is risky. You hesitate because you're not sure what comes next. This uncertainty consumes energy. I noticed that when conversations followed familiar routines, daily plans, meals, weather, simple emotions, my comprehension improved dramatically. The brain loves patterns. Predictability is calming. This is why practicing English through personal stories works so well. Stories create structure. Beginning, middle, end. Emotional logic. When language follows a narrative arc, your brain predicts more accurately and processes faster. That's also why emotional English feels harder. Emotions are less predictable. They interrupt patterns. They carry ambiguity. But they also increase memory retention. When emotional content is processed successfully, it sticks deeply. The key is balance. If emotional intensity is too high, comprehension collapses. If it's too low, learning doesn't anchor. The sweet spot is emotionally relevant but psychologically safe. That's where growth happens. During those 2 weeks, I began adjusting my conversations deliberately. When discussing something emotional, I reduced linguistic complexity. When discussing something technical, I reduced emotional interpretation. This separation lowered overall cognitive load. Science supports this approach. Emotional regulation improves language access. Language access improves emotional expression. The loop strengthens when each part is respected. Another factor many learners underestimate is self-monitoring. Constantly judging your own performance, accent, grammar, speed, activates anxiety. Anxiety increases cortisol. Cortisol interferes with memory retrieval. The cycle feeds itself. The solution is not confidence. It is permission. permission to speak imperfectly, permission to pause, permission to ask for repetition. These behaviors signal to your brain that mistakes are not dangerous. Once danger is removed, learning accelerates. This is why simple phrases became powerful tools for me. Can you say that again? I need a second. I don't have the word yet. These sentences do more than manage conversation. They regulate your nervous system. They keep you inside the learning zone instead of pushing you into shutdown. Understanding the science behind this removed shame. I stopped seeing struggle as evidence of inadequacy and started seeing it as a sign of high emotional engagement. You struggle most where you care most. Love raises stakes. Culture raises stakes. Of course the brain reacts. If you are learning English through life, not textbooks, you are doing one of the hardest forms of language acquisition. You are learning while adapting identity. That requires compassion toward yourself. Understanding is not just about hearing words. It is about creating conditions where your brain feels safe enough to receive them. Once you respect that, progress stops feeling forced. It becomes natural, uneven, human. And slowly, without drama, English begins to sound less like a test, and more like a place you can rest inside. Small daily actions. Big changes never saved my English. Small, almost boring actions did. 2 weeks ago, after everything felt heavy, language, culture, emotions, systems, I stopped asking myself how to improve faster. I asked a different question. What is the smallest thing I can do today that won't exhaust me? That question quietly changed the direction of everything. In American culture, progress is often framed as bold action, big goals, clear timelines, visible results. But language learning inside real life does not respond well to pressure. It responds to rhythm. And rhythm is built from small, repeatable actions that fit naturally into your day. I noticed this first in the mornings. Instead of studying English, I named what I was already doing, in English. Quietly. Slowly. Not for performance. Just for presence. I'm making coffee. It's cold again. I feel sleepy today. These sentences were not practice exercises. They were anchors. They connected language to movement, temperature, emotion. Cognitive science calls this embodied learning. When words attach to physical experience, memory strengthens. English stopped floating in my head and started living in my body. Another small action was choosing predictability over novelty. I listened to the same voices repeatedly. Same accents. Same pacing. Familiar tone. At first, it felt boring. but boredom was the point. Boredom told my nervous system that nothing dangerous was happening. Once that message landed, comprehension improved. Your brain learns best when it is not impressed. I also limited how much English I consumed emotionally. Not every conversation needed to be deep. Not every interaction needed explanation. Some days, yes, no, and later were enough. Giving yourself permission to stay shallow when tired prevents burnout. Burnout is not cured by motivation. It is prevented by restraint. In relationships, small actions mattered even more. Instead of long conversations about feelings, I focused on consistency. Showing up. Answering messages. Saying one honest sentence instead of 5 vague ones. I'm here. I need rest. I care, even quietly. These sentences became rituals. Rituals create safety. Safety reduces anxiety. Anxiety reduction improves language access. The loop reinforced itself. I also practiced one small but powerful habit, asking for time. In American culture, asking for time is respected. It signals self-awareness. I stopped forcing immediate responses and started saying, "Can I think about this?" That pause protected my English and my emotions. When I returned to the conversation, I was clearer. Not because I found better words, but because I felt steadier. There is science behind this. Delayed response reduces emotional reactivity and improves cognitive clarity. When you allow your brain to settle, language returns more reliably. Another daily action was narrowing focus. I stopped trying to learn English. I learned my English. The words I actually needed. The sentences I actually used. Love-related language. Daily logistics. Emotional check-ins. Relevance increased retention. Retention reduced effort. Language learning becomes sustainable when it serves your life instead of interrupting it. I also paid attention to recovery. How quickly did I bounce back after misunderstanding? After silence? After a mistake? Progress showed up not in flawless conversations, but in faster repair. Sorry, that's not what I meant. Let me try again. These phrases shortened emotional distance and kept conversations alive. Small actions trained resilience. Perhaps the most important habit was kindness toward inconsistency. Some days, my English felt strong. Some days, it collapsed. I stopped treating bad days as setbacks and started treating them as data. What changed? Sleep? Stress? Expectations? This curiosity replaced judgment. Judgment blocks learning. Curiosity opens it. American life moves fast. It rewards output. But language grows in the background, quietly, when pressure drops. Small daily actions create conditions where growth happens without force. If you are watching this and feeling overwhelmed, don't ask yourself to do more. Ask yourself to do less, but do it consistently. One sentence. One pause. One honest check-in. That is enough. Small actions are not signs of low ambition. They are signs of long-term thinking. And over time, these small choices do something remarkable. They turn English from an obstacle into a companion. Not loud. Not perfect. But reliable. And reliability, especially in love and learning, is what carries you forward when motivation fades. Trusting the quiet progress. Near the end of this journey, something subtle happened. Nothing dramatic changed on the outside. My English did not suddenly become fluent. My life did not become easier overnight. But inside, something stabilized. I stopped measuring progress the way I used to. Earlier, progress meant expansion. More words, longer conversations, clearer explanations. Now, progress meant something quieter, less fear when I spoke. Less tension when I listened. Less self-judgment after I finished a sentence. That shift matters more than any vocabulary list. In the United States, confidence is often mistaken for loudness. Fast speech. Quick opinions. Strong assertions. But real confidence, the kind that sustains relationships and learning, is calm. It does not rush to prove itself. It trusts that it will be understood eventually. That trust took time. I learned to notice how my body responded to English. Tight shoulders meant I was forcing it. Shallow breathing meant I was afraid of being wrong. When I slowed down, breathed deeper, and accepted silence, language flowed more naturally. Your nervous system speaks before your mouth does. One of the most important realizations was this: English did not need me to be impressive. It needed me to be present. When I focused on connection instead of correctness, conversations softened. People leaned in instead of pulling away. Misunderstandings became shared moments, not failures. I don't know how to say this clearly yet. That sentence alone changed many interactions. It signaled honesty. It invited patience. And in American culture, honesty, when delivered calmly, is often respected more than perfection. I also learned to trust partial understanding. Earlier, if I didn't understand everything, I assumed I understood nothing. That belief created panic. Panic erased comprehension. Over time, I practiced staying with uncertainty. I understood 60%, then 70%, then enough. Understanding does not arrive all at once. It accumulates quietly, like familiarity with a song you didn't realize you memorized. This applies to relationships as well. You don't suddenly understand another person completely. You learn their rhythm, their pauses, their emotional patterns. Language follows that learning, not the other way around. Another quiet shift was letting go of timelines. I stopped asking, "When will I be fluent?" I started asking, "How do I want English to feel in my life?" The answer was clear. I wanted it to feel supportive, not demanding. Useful, not exhausting. Present, not performative. Once that intention settled, decisions became easier. I said no to environments that pressured me. I chose conversations that felt safe. I reduced exposure to judgmental feedback. Progress accelerated, not because I pushed harder, but because resistance dropped. There is a principle in learning psychology called cognitive load. When your brain is overloaded with fear, expectation, or comparison, learning slows dramatically. When the load decreases, learning resumes naturally. Trusting quiet progress is an act of intelligence, not laziness. I also reframed mistakes. Mistakes were no longer evidence of inadequacy. They were signals of engagement. You cannot make mistakes in a language you are not using. Each error meant I was participating. When someone corrected me kindly, I treated it as collaboration, not criticism. When someone didn't correct me, I didn't assume success or failure. I stayed neutral. Neutrality is powerful. It keeps you moving. One day, I noticed something simple. I was no longer translating everything in my head. Not because my English was perfect, but because I was no longer afraid of missing something. I trusted myself to ask, to clarify, to repair. Trust reduces mental noise. Reduced noise improves fluency. This is especially important if you are learning English while building a life, working, loving, parenting, healing. You do not have unlimited cognitive energy. Quiet progress respects that reality. By this point, English felt less like a goal and more like a tool I could reach for when needed. Sometimes sharp, sometimes clumsy, but always available. That availability is the real milestone. If you are watching this and feeling behind, understand this. Visible progress is not the only kind that matters. Invisible progress, the kind that shows up as calm, patience and resilience, often comes first. And it counts. Trust the days when nothing seems to improve. Trust the pauses. Trust the slow accumulation of familiarity. Trust the version of yourself who keeps showing up, even quietly. Because one day, without warning, you will realize something important. English no longer feels heavy. And when that happens, you are already further than you think. Today, I want to take you into a very different moment of my life. A moment that did not look impressive on the outside, but somehow changed something deep inside me. It happened on a quiet Tuesday morning. Nothing special. No big problem. No dramatic event. Just a simple morning. Yet it taught me a lesson I had ignored for so many years. And maybe as you listen, you will see a part of your own story in mine. I woke up earlier than usual that day. The world outside was still half asleep. The street was silent. Even the birds seemed a little slow to start their songs. When I opened my window, a soft breeze moved across the room, bringing with it the faint smell of rain from the night before. The air felt fresh, almost new. And for the first time in a long time, I actually paused to notice it. Maybe you understand that feeling. When life becomes so fast, so full, so loud, that even a moment of silence feels strange. Like your mind doesn't know how to slow down anymore. I walked to the kitchen and made a cup of warm tea. Usually, I would drink it quickly and move on with my day. But that morning, something inside me whispered, "Stop. Just sit. Just be here for a second." So I listened. I sat by the window with my warm cup, watching the light slowly enter the room. Nothing happened. No message. No email. No urgency. Just light. Just quiet. Just me. But in that quiet, something started to rise. A thought. A question. A truth I had pushed down for too long. The truth was this: I had been living but not really living. Every day, I completed tasks. I checked boxes. I did what needed to be done. I survived. But I had stopped noticing the small parts of life that make living feel real. I had stopped feeling wonder. Stopped feeling curiosity. Stopped feeling gratitude. I was alive, but disconnected from my own life. And that morning, with the quiet air and the warm tea in my hands, I finally asked myself, why did I forget how to live? When did I stop paying attention? At first, I tried to answer logically. Work. Stress. expectations, responsibilities. But as I sat there longer, I realized the answer was deeper. I had been running from one thing to another for so long that I forgot to return to myself. I forgot to breathe with intention. I forgot to slow down enough to reconnect with the world around me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how many people around us live like that. Maybe even you. Maybe you're listening right now with that same exhaustion, that same quiet ache, that same sense of distance from your own heart. So let me share what happened next. A small bird landed on the tree outside my window. Nothing unusual. But the way it hopped, slowly, carefully, as if testing each branch, somehow reminded me of something important. It reminded me that life is not a race. The bird was not rushing. It was simply exploring, observing, moving at its own pace, present with each little moment. And watching that small bird, I felt something shift inside me, something soften, something open. For the first time in a very long time, I felt present, not thinking about yesterday, not worrying about tomorrow, just here, in this exact moment, alive. That feeling, simple as it was, changed everything. You see, living is not something that happens automatically. Breathing happens automatically. Surviving happens automatically. But living, truly living, requires attention. It requires awareness. It requires choosing to be here, instead of simply passing through time. And that morning taught me a truth I had forgotten. Life does not improve when the world becomes easier. Life improves when our awareness becomes deeper. Nothing around me changed that day. My job was still the same. My responsibilities were still the same. My challenges were still waiting for me. But I changed. My awareness changed. And because of that, the rest of the day felt different. When I walked outside, the colors looked brighter. The sounds felt clearer. Even the people I usually passed without noticing suddenly appeared more real, more human, more connected to me in ways I never stopped to appreciate before. And that made me wonder, how many beautiful things have I ignored? How many small miracles have I walked past? How many moments of joy have I been too busy to feel? Maybe you've asked yourself the same questions. So let me tell you the lesson I want you to remember from my story today. You do not need a new life. You need a new way of seeing the life you already have. You do not need more time. You need more presence. You do not need to wait for a perfect moment. You need to slow down enough to notice the moment you are already in. Life is not hiding from you. Life is waiting for you to come back to it. And maybe, Today is your Tuesday morning. Maybe this is your moment to stop, breathe, notice, and reconnect. Not with the world outside first, but with yourself. Because the moment you return to yourself, you return to life. Sometimes, love doesn't fail because two people are different. It fails because they stop listening. Different cultures, different climates, different ways of growing up. But love always speaks the same language when we slow down enough to hear it. If you are loving someone from another culture, or learning English while feeling lost, tired, or behind, remember this. You don't need to be perfect to be understood. You just need to stay curious, patient, and kind, with others, and with yourself. That is how love survives. That is how language grows. And that is how two very different worlds quietly become one.